I love him. I love everything about him.
A classic Argentinian. Dashing long hair like those Argentinians tend to have. Hard man. If you ever saw him as a player.
And he always talks about when I was a player, when I was a player, when I was a player.
It's intensity. That's what it's always been. It's intensity as a player, intensity as a coach.
He knew how to get his studs wet in a tackle, knew when to go in ankle high.
For him, what you do off the field as a person is often what you do on the field, be it as a coach or a player. So the two for him, I think, are kind of seamlessly intertwined.
If you cross him, he doesn't mess around.
Even now in the era of Jose Mourinho and coaches who didn't used to play, I think that gives him a level of respect and authority with his players, which he relies upon.
It's someone that had to fight to get where he is.
He's exceeded expectations, and he's exceeded the expectations of the fans as well.
You know, it's unusual. As one of the most understated managers in the league, Pochettino's side play aggressive yet refined football. But what brought Pochettino and his team to this point?
When he came in, I was slightly sceptical, like many Spurs fans, because we've had several kind of high-profile continental managers who've come in and we've expected big things. So Ramos, you could go further back, Santini even, AVB, who we wanted to love and so nearly did love.
Daniel Levy had gone in very hard for Louis van Gaal, and Louis van Gaal, from everything he said, was going to take the Spurs job, but then Manchester United came in. But more importantly than that, very soon after Pochettino signed, and he did his first interview in English, which he'd never really done at Southampton.
There was talk that he was already speaking English on the training field anyway, and had been for a long time. So I don't think it was a comprehension issue at all. I think he knew what he wanted to say to the players.
But it was slightly problematic in the odd time he felt he couldn't express a concept in English, and he described it in Spanish, and then it was translated. It was a much better answer than when he'd spoken in English.
But when you put lights, cameras, all of those kind of extra variables in there, you can very easily misspeak. We can do it as native speakers, so I fully expect someone who doesn't do that to have the same issues.
But we're starting to see that now. We're starting to see the nuances of his thought. You're starting to see his humour.
I believe that was something Levy insisted on in terms of building that relationship between fans and manager. Very soon the fans started to realise, OK, this guy's the real deal.
His first season was slightly ropey in terms of he was getting results, but the performances weren't there. The second season was phenomenal, played some of the best football we've played in my lifetime. And the thing that I love the most about him is he's really united the club. Everything from the directors and the boardroom through to the coaching staff, the players, and most importantly, in my opinion, the fans. He's really got us back on side, and the kind of language he uses pre and post game is very inclusive, and we feel like we've kind of bonded with the club all over again. And
for him, it was vital that he changed that if he wanted them to get there, because they couldn't be serial chokers anymore.
He has an incredibly clear sense of how he wants football to be played. I think that in England, we look down on people who use the word philosophy in football, but Pochettino is very unembarrassed about talking about his philosophy, not in a kind of intellectual sense, but in the sense that he knows exactly how he wants his teams to play, he knows how he wants to coach them, and that kind of clarity of conviction that he has is quite rare.
Pochettino is a product of his environment, without doubt. He's a product of Bielsa's tutelage, I think of starting at Newell's, coming from Murphy's. Everything that I think was around him as a youngster has pushed him to where he is now.
Argentina has a very profound love of theory, and I think that's very readily explicable. Almost entirely immigrant nation. By 1918, 80% of all people had either not been born there or their parents had not been born there. The indigenous peoples were wiped out in the wars of the 1870s, and wars is a very gentle term for what actually happened. The British ran the banking system, ran the railways, and sort of essentially ran the economy. They leave as the First World War begins. I mean, this is a very broad brush. What is it to be Argentinian? 1 million Spaniards, 800,000 Italians, 400,000 Northern European Jews, 400,000 Arabs, 30,000 British and Irish, roughly similar numbers of French and Germans. It's this great mix, people from different backgrounds, different ideas, different societies they've come from. What are we dreaming of being? The Argentinian hypocrisy, a country of utopianism and dystopianism, that people try to build utopias, the reality inevitably falls short, and that leads people into radical cynicism. And I think that's exactly what happened with football. Argentinian football, we start with the beginning of professionalism in 1931. Right to 1958, Argentinian football was attack, skill, individuals, players who went out and danced the tango on a Saturday night, drank their red wine, and then turned up and played brilliantly on the Sunday afternoon. Yeah, that was the dream, to be that bohemian who didn't do European things like training or running, but then their sort of native wit, their natural skill carried them through. And so that was the self-image. That was how they liked to see themselves. That was what football was supposed to be. Then they get beaten 6-1. We talked to Northern Irish players who said, we couldn't believe there's just these little fat men waving to girls in the crowd. But yeah, they clearly weren't fit. They weren't physical. They weren't organised in the way that European football was becoming by then. Once the utopia is discredited, what rises is the very opposite. So the Antes win the Libertadores. They're Estudiantes, who were sort of the great practitioners of anti-football. They win the Libertadores 3 times in a row. But by 1970, Argentina failed to qualify for the 1970 World Cup, so questions have been asked, what's gone wrong with our football? The answer people find is, hang on, this Estudiantes side are pretty horrible. And you end up with the famous Intercontinental Cup final against Milan. 3 of their players were arrested by Argentinian police for violence on the pitch. And that's sort of the beginning of the end of anti-football. But in 74, they do qualify for the World Cup. They're very well beaten by the Dutch, who've also beaten Uruguay and also beaten Brazil, which is sort of the message that all of South America gets of our football doesn't work anymore, the Dutch are what we've got to follow. Now, Menotti is actually quite scathing about the Dutch in the 70s, but a lot of the things we think of characteristic of total football he uses. And then, of course, his great validation with victory in 1978 is a return to what he would claim were the traditional values of Argentine football, to the romanticism added to incredible fitness, shall we say. He replaces Menotti in 1982 after a disappointing World Cup. Bilardo, who's played in that Estudiantes side in the late 60s, who's absolutely from the anti-football school. And that was what they did. They flipped and flopped between the two until Bielsa takes over in 1998. Previously, coaches always seem to feel a need to, I'm this way, I'm that way. Bielsa does something completely different. Insistence on verticality, getting the ball forward quickly, attacking and attacking and attacking. Menotista, hard work, fitness, repetitions of positional drills is very Bilardista. As others found a third way in the 90s, so Bielsa found a third way in the 90s. Pochettino clearly comes from that school. He's working with better quality players, so he's able to do more things with them. In terms of the spectrum of Argentinian coaching, he's very much of a Bielsista school.
The thing with Pochettino is it's actually quite simple to map his route from player to manager.
He is someone who relies an awful lot on the experiences of his playing days. Like he was a good player, but not a very good player, although he certainly made the most of his talents.
I mean, the famous story that Bielsa was working as a youth coordinator at Newell's Old Boys, which is a team based in Rosario. Players tend to go to Buenos Aires. That A, there's just a lot more people in Buenos Aires, but B, that's sort of a natural way you would gravitate as a talented young player. So what Bielsa did was to think, well, Argentina is a huge country. It's entirely possible there are people in the interior who are just not getting picked up. So he divided the map of Argentina into zones. And then because he hates flying, he drove to each of them. And they'd arranged trial games in each zone. And so he picked up a load of players like that. Now, Pochettino's from a town called Murphy, which is, I think it's within about 100 miles of Rosario. It's not far from Rosario at all. And he missed the trial game there, but he heard very good reports of this young centre-back. So he went to Pochettino's parents' house, 2 in the morning by the time he gets there, and says, want to sign your son? And Mr. and Mrs. Pochettino say, sorry, he's in bed. So Bielsa goes in his bedroom, lifts up the duvet, looks at his legs, goes, yep, footballer's legs will have him. That was how they first met.
Went away at 14. He said himself he lived in really horrible conditions, cold, wet, everything you can think of.
At 18, Bielsa brings him into the team. Bielsa's become coach by then. And they're hugely successful. They win 2 league titles, they get to the final of Libertadores.
I mean, that team in general was arguably similar to the Spurs one you see now. It was intensity, it was pressure. There was a player for Boca Juniors who said they were like a tractor. They just used to smother you. It was so difficult to play against. It was suffocating.
Very high press, it's very aggressive football, which has now become very voguish. And you see Tottenham, Liverpool, Borussia Dortmund playing that style of football. Bielsa was one of the great pioneers of that. I mean, Pochettino himself talks about how influenced he has been by Bielsa.
He has a really good season at Espanyol, and Bielsa asks him, how do you think you did? And Pochettino, trying to be quite clever, thinks, well, I had a 9 or a 10 season, and this is how he tells the story. And he said, but I thought I'd be a little bit modest and I'll drop it down to a 7 or 8. And he says that to Bielsa, and Bielsa says, you were shit. And if you keep playing like that, you'll not play for me and you'll not play for Argentina either. And Pochettino says that he drove home in tears that day. And he also points to the fact that that was his kind of eureka moment.
And so he does clearly have that kind of intellectual relationship with his coaches, and he always knew that he was going to be a coach. And I remember Mikel Arteta saying that when Arteta was playing for PSG as a teenager in about 2003, Pochettino was their captain of PSG. He was about 34, 35, coming at the end of his career. But Arteta knew then that Pochettino was going to be a manager, because he had that sense of responsibility in the dressing room, that the way that he thought about tactics, the way that he talked to the coach
he changes as a person as well. And he's talked about that very openly, that as a youngster, he thought he knew it all. He was very arrogant, he was very brash, he didn't really understand why people were trying to give him advice, he thought he knew it all himself.
By his late 20s, he knew that he was going to be a manager, and he was already starting the process of learning about what sort of manager he would become.
And Bielsa's whole theory is based on blocking up those passing lanes and playing with great aggression. And you can see Pochettino has been very influenced by that.
Well, firstly, I think they high press. They press very, very well in the final third. They compact the game. The defenders are up on the halfway line, but they have great balance through the team. There's a lot of movement in this Spurs team that you don't really see. Christian Eriksen drifting inside, Dele Alli running in behind, Harry Kane coming towards the ball, and I think that's where Spurs do their best work. It's the fluidity in their attack. Gives them great options to create goals, create opportunities to get shots away. So I'd say it's a high press, attacking, but also defensively very, very strong system.
The most important players are probably the fullbacks, because he likes to overload in central areas. You look at Dele Alli, Christian Eriksen, Eric Lamela, they all like to come inside, tighten it up, be creative, quick passing, which asks the fullbacks to bomb on, which is why he's got two very athletic, super fit fullbacks in Kyle Walker and Danny Rose. As a centre-back himself, I think he works very hard on that, and playing that offside line is very important.
Maybe this is true of Pochettino as well, but certainly with Bielsa, I think the shape is far less important than the style. Get players in the best possible position to press the opposition in the areas where they need pressing. Now, obviously you have a basic structure, because when you don't have the ball and you've accepted your first press is not going to regain possession, you have to have a fallback position. Now, whether that's got a libero, whether it's a flat four, that depends entirely on those players, depends on the league you're playing in. And one of the problems when you have a system that's that unique is that when players come into that system, they can find it very hard to adapt. And particularly when it's so brutally hard. If you've been used to kind of going to training, feeling quite tired, going to bed, waking up and feeling fresh, and then suddenly you're worked so hard that when you wake up next morning you still feel terrible. If you've had 10 years of your career not being like that, then you're going to kick against that. So I think that's one of the reasons why youth development is so important for Pochettino and why he's been so good at it.
With him being so keen on youth development, it's clear to see why the young guys in his side have prospered under his guidance.
Well, it's fantastic for English football. It's one of the great successes, I think, of the Pochettino era, has been bringing through Dele Alli, Harry Kane and Eric Dyer specifically, and turning them into Premier League regulars. Like, we hear all the time about how there's no pathway for talented young English players into the top Premier League teams, or how maybe the young players aren't good enough. But I think the Spurs example shows that what English football needs, managers who have the foresight and the vision and the bravery to take these 20-year-old English players and put them in the team. The academy staff at Tottenham love him. They've been producing very good players for a long time, but they've not always been getting into the team. And I heard recently that one of the top academy staff at Tottenham described Pochettino as the coach he'd been waiting his whole life to work for. He's spent so much time making these good players, but it's only now with Pochettino that Spurs have a first-team manager who's going to pick them.
For me, I think it's just the way he goes around everything, and he has a lot of trust in youngsters, which obviously being 20 is important when I was looking to sign at Tottenham. And also something that's massive for me is I think he concentrates a lot on you as a person as well. He tries to make you a better person off the pitch and obviously a better player on it, which is good.
Most Premier League managers loan out their young players. When they get to 18 or 19, they go and spend a year in League One, a year in the Championship, so they can toughen up and play against men and all that. Now, Pochettino sees this very differently. He thinks that he is the best coach for these young players, and therefore he thinks that there's no point in loaning out one of his very good 19-year-olds into the Championship to get coached by a worse coach, to get taught to play football in a worse way, and that will therefore make him less equipped, not more equipped, to play for Tottenham's first team. So, for example, Harry Winks and Josh Onuma have never been loaned out by Tottenham. That's not because Pochettino doesn't like them, it's because he does like them. And he thinks that the best way for them to develop is to be coached by him.
There's one story that sticks out that was his first day in the job, and the first person who he saw at the training ground and brought in for a meeting was Danny Rose. He had a meeting with him for an hour and a half, and he said, look, you're a good player, but I will turn you into an international footballer. When he first got his international call-up, Pochettino brought him into the office and said, Danny, we've had an offer for you and we're going to sell you. And Danny Rose was like, what do you mean? Like, you promised me all this stuff. And his staff were in there with him. He's like, sorry, Danny, this is just football, it's business or whatever. And he goes to walk out the door and he goes, we're just kidding you, you've been called up by the England squad. And that to me shows everything about him. The kind of ambition, the bravery of Pochettino to say, this is what I will do with you. If you give me everything, I will give you everything. And then also that ability further down the line, take the piss out of him a bit, get him on edge a little bit, and then put his arms around him. Perfect example of what Pochettino is all about.
It slightly plays on that sort of macho Argentinian thing that, yeah, he was tough. You know, he was a hard man, he was a hard player. I think he probably is still hard in a different way.
When you signed a contract to Tottenham, you signed a contract to train, not to play. The implication of this is that players have no right to play the games. The only person who picks the team is Pochettino. I've never heard any other manager describe it in that way, although when he says it, you can instantly see that it's true, or at least that it's a kind of plausible explanation of the relationship between player and coach. And that means that players who do complain about not playing get fairly short shrift. And while nominally Pochettino's door is always open, in reality, players who go through the door to say, boss, why aren't I in the team, get quite a brisk response.
I think sometimes he's too ruthless, too stuck in his ways. I mean, he's trying to change the mentality of the squad, which means if you cross him, he doesn't mess around. There's a bit of Sir Alex Ferguson, Jose Mourinho about him there, and he's got this whole nice guy thing. But Andros Townsend, you know, one argument with the fitness coach and he was out the door.
Spurs had a group of players who were slightly disaffected. They were kind of known at Spurs as the bomb squad. There's Yunus Kabul, Emmanuel Adebayor, Aaron Lennon, Benoit Asuakoto, and they've all gone now. You know, Pochettino quite quickly realised he didn't want them in his team.
The Tottenham ground is looks like family. Everyone is like, you know, together, work together. This makes the special team, I think.
He can at times be quite indecisive with changing things. Substitutions tend to happen 70, 75 minutes, which quite often is too late. And I think the best managers make changes decisively and early. I can't imagine Pochettino hauling players off at half-time too often. He likes to give them a chance to redeem themselves, which I admire in some ways, but sometimes if it's not working, it's not working, and you have to start from scratch.
I think it sometimes just lacks a little bit of intelligence and a little bit of patience. One, when Spurs are chasing a game and trying to play that final pass to create a chance, and I think sometimes they're a bit too frantic. And sometimes when they're ahead in a game and they're trying to see it out, they can't slow the game down to see it out.
And last season, they lost it mentally at the end. Yeah, they really buckled under the pressure. The draw at home against West Brom, and the game they were leading, you should never mess that up. And then the real disgrace at Chelsea, which nobody really seems to talk about, but 2-0 up, and then the second half, Chelsea come back, score twice, and Spurs could have had about half a dozen players sent off in the end.
I think what was more detrimental to Spurs was that last game of the season, because that was a full-on down-tool Spurs of yesteryear in the worst ways possible.
He was furious with the players after that 5-1 defeat at Newcastle United on the last day. He said it was the worst moment of his career. He said that afterwards that he wants to kill the players. The problem was, because it was the last game of the season, they all flew off on their holidays that Sunday evening. And it wasn't until he got all the players together back in Australia in, I think, the first weekend of August, the pre-season, that he could tell them exactly what he thought of their non-performance that day.
He's got to take responsibility for the fitness. That's entirely his job.
But I think in reality, he also knew that the problems had set in a few weeks before then. And it's interesting when you talk to Pochettino, because he says that the problem was mental. He said the players weren't mature enough, they weren't strong enough in their heads over the last few games of the season. And I think that's part of the story, but I think it doesn't recognise the fact that the players were tiring by then, as they often do towards the end of seasons of Pochettino's career.
How did you lose 5-1 at Newcastle when they're down to 10 men? I mean, that's...
The doubles training sessions are infamous. They're quite clever with that. With the doubles training sessions, they don't do it when they're playing every 2 or 3 days, but it'll be a training session in the morning, then a gym session in the afternoon. But he does demand his players work awfully hard.
I think he's a perfectionist at heart, honestly. When I watch him talk, when I see the way he operates, I don't think he's ever happy in that sense.
I think the problem with Tottenham is that everyone at Tottenham is underpaid. You know, from Pochettino to Harry Kane, Eric Dyer, all the members of the staff. You know, Tottenham pay sensible salaries, but the problem with modern football is that sensible means underpaid, and everyone at the club could earn more money elsewhere. And in practical terms, this means that Spurs simply don't have the quality of playing playing squad that their rivals have. And that means the fact that Spurs came so close to winning the title last year, even though they didn't win it in the end, is still an incredible achievement. And if they finish in the top 4 this year, as I think they probably will do just, that is itself another great achievement.
It feels to us like he wants to build a legacy.
It puts them in a really trendy position where potentially in London, when they're looking for fans, they're coming up against Arsenal, Chelsea, and whatever, they've got the trendiest manager. And he plays a cool style of football. So that's why they're getting so many plaudits. It's a young team, it's a trendy team, and it's what people want to see right now.
I think he's changed the philosophy from the top of the club to the fans. So I think even if it went horribly wrong and he went next week, I feel like he's put enough things in place that we can consider ourselves to be fortunate and that we're on the right path regardless.
I think he's very ambitious. I think he certainly wants to coach at the very top. He said the other day in an interview that the only jobs that would interest him are Argentina and Newell's Old Boys. I think in reality, you know, Real Madrid, maybe not Barcelona because of Espanyol, Manchester United, Manchester City, I think these are all very plausible future destinations for him. I think that while he's done fantastic work at Tottenham, I don't think that he sees Tottenham as the last club that he will coach in his career. And I think it's fair to assume that he will continue that upward progression if and when he does leave Tottenham.
He has the chance to, in 4 or 5 years' time, have the funds suddenly to come in from the kind of corporate money that will come in from the new stadium. It will be a bigger stadium than those lot down the road, which would be big and important to the fans and is important.
We're quite an impatient bunch, particularly since we had Champions League football under Harry Redknapp. And when things aren't going well, we have high expectations that they be turned around as soon as possible. We've got this, and then we clutch defeat from the jaws of victory, or something goes horribly wrong, be it an injury or...
The notion of Spursiness will always be there until they win the league 2 or 3 years in a row. I mean,
to an extent, I think every football club feels that way about their team.
The culture of a club is a very, very strange phenomenon. It's very hard to explain.
And with this hard-working, refreshing approach, there's a newfound belief around the club.
The atmosphere at Spurs, I'd say, is better than it has been for a long time. I think even though, you know, the fans can get on the team's back if they don't score first, there is always that anxiousness there. I think the fans believe that we can get back into the game. Under Pochettino, with this squad, with these players.
He's got a squad with the depth. You think, yeah, he can rotate regularly, and maybe this season is a season when they can keep pushing through that final third.
So what does the future hold for Mauricio Pochettino and Tottenham Hotspur?
There's always a way for us to get the result, essentially.
We as the club, we as him and his staff, we as him, the staff and the fans and the players, and that's got a genuine aspect to it.
The fans understand Pochettino's here for the long term, these players are here for the long term. We understand the long-term strategy, the long-term project. In the short term, we know we're seeing some of the best football we've ever seen played at White Hart Lane. And there is that belief that we can win every game.
I don't think there's that same lads, it's Tottenham mentality now in other clubs. I think Pochettino's changed that mentality. And I think that when Tottenham come to your ground now, you'll know you're in for a fight.